Imagine this. It's the freezing, absolutely chaotic night of December 29th, 1876. A blinding Lake Erie blizzard is just howling outside. And the Lake Shore and Michigan Southern Railway's train number 5, the Pacific Express, is creeping through the deep snow. It's hauling 2 heavy locomotive and 11 passenger and baggage cars, pushing forward completely blind in the whiteout. Out of the darkness, it approaches an iron bridge spanning the Ashtabula River gorge. What happens next will not only become one of the deadliest railway disasters in American history, but it's literally going to put the entire profession of bridge engineering on trial. Welcome to our explanation on the Ashtabula River horror.
So, the Pacific Express was already running nearly 2 hours late. By 7:30 p.m., the train glides onto the Ashtabula Bridge at a super cautious 10 to 15 miles per hour. Then, disaster strikes. Daniel McGuire, the engineer in the lead locomotive, which was named Socrates, suddenly hears this sharp crack and feels the bridge literally dropping out from under him. In a split-second decision, he throws the throttle wide open. The Socrates surges forward, the coupling to the second engine snaps, and the lead engine miraculously claws its way onto solid ground. But everything else, the second engine, Columbia, and 11 wooden cars packed with nearly 160 passengers and crew plummets 76 feet straight down into the icy ravine.
Okay, let's dive into this. How did a massive iron bridge on a major railway corridor just snap in half under an ordinary load? I mean, this wasn't a sudden act of God or a freak weather accident. To really understand this, we have to rewind the clock back to the 1860s and look at the backstory of the structure itself. The seeds of this disaster were planted more than a decade earlier.
Section 1. Amasa Stone's Fatal Hubris and the Experimental Bridge.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core of the problem. Our story really centers on a powerful railroad president named Amasa Stone. Stone had bought the rights to a highly successful bridge design called the Howe Truss. Now, the Howe Truss was proven and incredibly reliable when it was built out of wood. But Stone decided he wanted an all-iron Howe Truss over the Ashtabula River. The issue? Well, Stone was an executive, right? He wasn't a specialized iron bridge engineer. He was pushing an unproven experimental design. And when he presented his plans, professional engineers pushed back hard. Joseph Tomlinson, a well-known bridge builder, warned Stone that the iron members were dangerously undersized. Stone just fired him. Charles Collins, the railroad's chief engineer, refused to endorse the design. He was removed from the project. Stone ignored the experts and just built his heavy, all-iron monstrosity anyway. He drastically increased the dead load, the sheer weight of the bridge itself, and he inverted the traditional design, putting extreme, completely untested stress on the cast iron connections.
But Stone didn't stop there. He altered the ends of the bridge, using what's known as a single Howe end panel. Instead of a robust web of supports, this setup relied on just one vertical post and 2 diagonal braces at the ends. It's like putting all the pressure of a massive structure onto just a few tiny critical points. Furthermore, during construction, when the bridge literally buckled under its own weight, Stone frantically added more iron I-beams to fix it. He forced his workers to rotate the beams and cut away parts of the iron just so they would fit onto the cast iron angle blocks. He was actively weakening the structure to cover up his initial design flaws. Actually, scratch that. It wasn't just a flaw. It was a ticking time bomb.
Moving on to Part 2. Fire in the Gorge. A catastrophic rescue failure.
You know, when those shattered wooden cars smashed into the riverbed, their coal-fired stoves and kerosene lamps overturned and instantly ignited a roaring bonfire. Townspeople and railroad workers frantically scrambled down the steep, snowy banks to pull survivors from the wreckage. But when the Ashtabula Fire Brigade arrived with their steam and hand-pumped engines, Fire Chief G.W. Knapp bafflingly refused to order water onto the flames. Even as bystanders literally begged him to act, and even as it was glaringly obvious that injured passengers were still trapped alive inside the burning cars, Knapp just claimed it was useless. Because of this catastrophic negligence, many of the people who actually survived that 76-foot fall quickly burned or suffocated in the smoke.
The human toll was just devastating. To put this into perspective, approximately 92 people died that night and 64 were injured. The fire was so intense that many of the bodies were reduced to ash, leaving families to try and identify their loved ones by charred ticket stubs or melted pocket watches. Among the dead was the famous gospel songwriter Philip P. Bliss and his wife Lucy. Bliss was known worldwide for his hymns, and losing such prominent figures really sent a shockwave of mourning across the entire country.
Which brings us to Part 3. 3 damning investigations and uncovering the truth.
The public was absolutely outraged, and they demanded answers. Investigators needed to understand the exact mechanical sequence of the collapse. It's crucial to understand this progressive failure. Step 1. A heavy, cast-iron angle block on the west end of the bridge snapped. Why? Because it was cast with a massive air hole inside it, completely halving its strength. Plus, it had suffered from a decade of metal fatigue and freezing temperatures. Step 2. With that lug broken, the iron braces slipped, causing the top chord of the bridge to violently buckle laterally. And Step 3. This triggered a progressive unchaining. The bridge didn't just drop all at once. It basically unzipped, piece by piece, right under the heavy load of the train.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer consensus among all the investigating bodies. A striking consensus emerged across the board. The coroner's jury, the state legislator, and independent civil engineers all pointed to the exact same fatal intersection: poor design, flawed materials, and a total lack of competent inspection. Think about that. All 3 independent investigations concluded that this bridge stood for 11 years without a single competent analytical inspection that would have easily spotted these glaring defects.
Civil engineer Charles McDonald examined the physical wreckage himself, and his report was absolutely damning. He wrote, "The cast-iron angle block atop of second set of braces had the south lug broken off close to the face, and the line of fracture disclosed an air hole." Well, what that means is this wasn't just bad design, it was bad materials. The cast iron that Amasa Stone had insisted upon using, despite the warnings of all those experts, literally had empty voids hidden inside the metal at its most critical stress points.
Finally, Part 4, Legacy and Human Toll, and Transforming Railway Safety.
The aftermath of this disaster carried a really dark coda. The men responsible couldn't escape the shadow of the 92 dead. Charles Collins, the engineer who originally refused to endorse Stone's design but later oversaw the deeply flawed inspection process, was found dead of a gunshot wound to the head shortly after testifying. It was historically ruled a suicide driven by guilt, though later, secret autopsies suggested it might have actually been murder. As for Amasa Stone, the disgraced executive fiercely denied responsibility for years, floating these wild theories about a tornado or a loose rail. But the public scorn was immense, and 6 years later, Stone took his own life. But let's look at how this tragedy built into the modern world. Ashtabula fundamentally transformed American railway safety forever. It marked the definitive end of executive design bridges. From here on out, bridge engineering became a strictly professionalized field. Because of that hidden air hole, standard specifications completely banned the use of cast iron in structural bridge parts. The horrific fire accelerated the mandate for safer, self-extinguishing heating systems in passenger cars. And finally, the sheer scale of the disaster fed a growing public demand that eventually led to formal federal oversight of railroad accidents.
The Ashtabula River disaster is a haunting reminder of what happens when executive hubris overrides technical expertise, and when routine inspections are treated as a mere formality. Amasa Stone treated a mainline railway bridge as his personal experiment, and 92 people paid the price in the freezing dark. Which leaves us with a provocative thought as we wrap up this explainer. If it historically takes a massive tragedy to force the implementation of professional safety standards, what modern experimental systems, whether it's in our software, our infrastructure, or our transportation, are we blindly trusting today? Thanks so much for joining me, and keep questioning the structures around you.